Somebody on Cracked.com once described Quentin Tarantino as being a movie DJ instead of a movie director. He constantly mixes and matches pop culture references with genres, with music styles, with his own obscure taste in films. As a result, Django Unchained feels like a glorified $100 million B-movie. This movie's in the same style of fantasy revenge fiction that Inglourious Basterds was in, except that the story takes place in the 1850s American South, and Hans Landa is actually a good guy. The story focuses on Hans Landa taking a man named Django out of slavery and turning him into the most ruthless bounty hunter and gunslinger in the Deep South. After Django learns the trade of bounty hunting, the pair of them set out to free Django's wife from slavery. It turns out that she's been bought by the ruthless and incredibly evil Calvin Candie, played with fiery gusto by Leonardo DiCaprio. Candie is also assisted by an old Uncle Tom figure, who's played by Samuel L. Jackson, and will likely make several people think of Uncle Ruckus. Going into the theater, I hadn't predicted just how much of a farce this movie was going to be. For all the serious subject matter and the genuine tension of some scenes, the film just can't be taken seriously. Django Unchained is basically a giant homage to spaghetti westerns and exploitation movies, while also being controversial with its fantasy revenge of the freed slave against racist whites. The soundtrack is a mix between modern R&B tracks and music by Ennio Morricone. The cast is filled with renowned character actors, and it's exactly the kind of movie that Tarantino fans love. Of course, a Tarantino movie always has flaws. The pacing is slowed down in order to set atmosphere, plot holes that exist just allow for more shootouts and violence, characters make decisions that don't make sense at all realistically, but of course, anyone looking for realism in a Tarantino movie will be bitterly disappointed. What often makes a Tarantino movie memorable is the writing and performances. In this case, the movie's writing usually works, and actors usually get to act the hell out of their scenes. Jamie Foxx gives possibly his best performance since Ray in this movie, playing a man who spends a large part of the movie having to play a role amongst a group of slave owners while barely holding his temper. One downside is that Kerry Washington, who plays his wife, has absolutely nothing to do in this movie except be the typical damsel in distress. But then again, that's part of what Tarantino was poking fun at with his endless homaging. Notice how earlier in the review I said Hans Landa instead of Christoph Waltz's proper character name, Dr. King Schultz. I say this because aside from the whole racist Nazi angle, Waltz is essentially playing the same character as he was in Inglourious Basterds. I mean, the elaborate vocabulary, the casual elegance, the savage enjoyment of what he's doing, it's all carried over into this movie. While I do think Waltz did a genuinely good job with this role, it does sort of disappoint me that he got the Oscar nomination over Leonardo DiCaprio. Because if there was one thing that I loved about this movie, it was finally getting to see DiCaprio's take on an especially villainous role. It's such a departure from almost everything he's ever done before, and he makes it work brilliantly. After being the hero or the conflicted anti-hero for so long, DiCaprio seems to have real fun playing a truly vile man, whose idea of entertainment is watching two black men slowly beat each other to death. The movie is meant to be polarizing and controversial. Just like the exploitation films and spaghetti westerns that it honors, Django Unchained's use of heavy violence and racial slurs is just part of the Tarantino signature. I'm not sure if I'm getting a bit tired of the formula or if the formula just isn't working as well as it did with his first three movies, but either way, I wouldn't really call this film one of his best. That said, I think a lot of people will enjoy it. A lot of people have enjoyed it, and it can certainly be called a classic Tarantino film.